live as live can be. Hello, everybody. Mike Mills with Verity Mortgage here today. This is my 45th episode of the Texas Real Estate and Finance Podcast. And if you guys are needing anybody to pre-qual buyers or looking to refinance, please give me a call. Other than that, we'll just move right on to it. So today I'm welcoming a good friend of mine, Manny Martinez, and he is a realtor and a Jiu Jitsu instructor. So we are definitely going to have a great conversation today. And if you are into self-defense and if you're out showing houses by yourself all the time, this is certainly going to be one you're going to want to turn in. Excuse me, I can't talk today. This is going to be one you're going to want to tune into. So without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Manny. How you doing, sir? I even got clapping for you. You like that?
Yeah, appreciate it. I like how you plug yourself before the intro.
Yeah, I gotta get that in there first.
Right there.
Yes, that's a very important part of it. You know, otherwise, what am I doing this for, right? Somebody call me with a buyer, so that's what we're looking for. So thanks for coming in, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me.
So Manny and I have worked together in the past, and we are, he just recently opened his own jiu-jitsu studio, and everything I do on the podcast, I try as much as possible to gear it towards things that help realtors out. And especially these days, because, you're out there showing houses by yourself. You're hosting open houses by yourself, having strangers come in, and you just kind of have to assume that everybody's, got your best interests in mind when they show up. And that's not always the case. So I wanted to bring Manny in here, obviously talk a little bit about real estate, but also to talk about, what he does as an instructor for jiu-jitsu and how it can relate to people learning self-defense, especially agents, to make sure that they feel safe when they're out there, doing all this stuff alone. So to start with, you were in the military, right?
Yeah, I spent 10 years in the Army.
Yes. So, and you were, I think you get to sergeant, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So how'd you get going down that path?
I just needed something to do.
Yeah.
I was like, well, yeah, I was just, basically just working, doing nothing. And I was
Right.
like, man, I really need some direction in my life. I decided to just join up and
How old were you?
get going. I was 21 when I joined.
Okay. So it was a little bit after high school then.
Yeah, it was a little while. I was already, like I said, I've been working for a few years.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of hanging out. And my brother was actually in the Marine Corps.
Okay.
And he'd done a few tours in Iraq in like that initial period. So like in 2003 in the invasion.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I really need to make my own path as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided like I was going to go and join the military. And
so obviously that experience is going to change you. There's no doubt, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think are some of the things that you took away from that have helped you with everything else in your life? Because you develop certain qualities and traits in a situation like that, somebody that hasn't gone through that doesn't necessarily know or understand. But I don't think maybe everybody always realizes that there's a lot of things that you develop in the military that carry on to every other aspect of your life. So what's some of the stuff that you think you picked up that's really kind of helped you through everything else?
I think most importantly is resilience.
Okay.
One thing that the military will teach you is like, you could just take your loss and go about your day. Like
Right.
I'm just saying, because there's a lot of times where you will go through the ringer, and then you have to, at the end of the day, you're going to be okay.
Right.
Like you'll be all right. Just keep going, keep chugging along.
Right. There's no poor me. That's not allowed, right?
That's what I'm saying. You can't feel sorry for yourself for a second.
Right.
And so I was able to carry that over. Also discipline, obviously with the discipline, like backwards planning all of my stuff. So I still do that to this day. That's a skill that I picked up in the military.
When you say backwards planning, what do you mean?
So let's say if I have something I have to do or somewhere I have to be, I'm like, okay, I got to be there at 1:00. Okay, that means I have to leave by 12:30. Okay, if I have to leave at 12:30, I
get
ready at 12 or whatever,
Okay.
11:45, and you backwards plan all the way up until like the day before.
Gotcha.
And so
I do that. I didn't even know that was a thing.
yeah,
so
backwards planning.
I didn't know that had a name for it.
Teach,
Okay.
yeah.
I always do that. Anytime I have to go somewhere, I'm like, all right, I got to be there. I'm like mapping out the get to the airport, what time we have to be there. Then I work all the way back to know
And
when I
then
go.
you have to give your buffer time, like, okay, in case I get traffic or whatever. And then, yeah, that's backwards planning. And they teach that. That's something that I still use today is, everything I do is backwards planning. Yeah.
So you're in the military for 10. Did you actually serve active duty?
Yeah, I was active for 10 years.
Where were you at?
Well, I was stationed up in Washington State at Fort Lewis for about 6 years. I did both of my deployments out of there. So I did a year in Iraq, and then I did a year in Afghanistan. And then I went down to Fort Hood, Texas, which is now, I think it's Fort Cavazos now. They just changed the name.
Oh yeah, I think I did see that.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So they just changed the name. It was like a Confederate thing.
How was your? Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. They always
yeah,
gotta. Everybody gets upset about
yeah.
names and statues.
Yeah.
What? Where was your how was your deployment? What was that like?
Mm, deployments. They're just yeah, they
Deployments.
were just ran, yeah. So it was funny too because I was field artillery, so we were shooting like these howitzers. And then my first deployment, we didn't do our job at all. Like they were, just because the howitzers would cause too much damage for
Mhm.
those like smaller. Iraq is very compact. They're
Right.
cities, and so we couldn't use those howitzers. They're like, okay, well, you're rifle platoons now, and so they put us in these up armored trucks, and we're just patrolling. And I primarily worked like on the border of Iraq and Iran.
Mhm.
We were screening like all the people coming over from Iran, making sure they didn't know explosives,
Right.
looking for people who were like on the wanted list or
Right.
whatnot. We used to like a lot of there's a technology we used to use that would scan the iris of people's like eyes. We would just scan them and it would pop up if they were like
On
came
the
up on a
list.
list. Yeah, I'm like, okay, well, this guy we got to detain or whatever. And then
It's so crazy when you hear about technology stuff because the government and what they have is so far ahead
yeah,
of what the general populace is aware of. Because I mean, you're thinking like, what
yeah,
this is 2000 something, and
yeah.
you're
This is
you're
2009. Yeah,
and they're scanning, retinas like
yeah.
just remotely, and
Well, we would sit them down. We'd pull them out and like, especially the like what we say military age males, like 18 to 36.
right,
So those guys, would have to sit them down and scan their retina or whatever. And I say, yeah, the technology is up there, but I feel like, especially with conspiracy theories, people kind of overestimate the government's ability
yeah.
because one, they don't talk to
There's
each
more
other, and
incompetence than
there's a lot of incompetence in there. I
yes.
mean, and a lot of wasted tax dollars. And
Yeah,
so,
the a buddy of mine and I joke about it all the time about
yeah,
how this, because I'm into conspiracy theories. I love them,
yeah, me too.
but more often than
Yeah,
not, it's not that there's this cabal of people planning this massive thing. It's more just a series of incompetence that occurs
yeah,
with incentives involved to either get money or control or power or whatever.
yeah,
There's always a direction that someone's trying to head, but at the end of the day, most of the time it's still stupid people running stuff. And
yeah.
there's a lot of mistakes that happen. And when things go south, that's generally what it is. Um, so you get out of the military, come back,
Mhm.
and then you got to go get a regular job, right?
Yeah.
So did you go right into real estate after that, or did you do some things in between?
No, I was lost for a little bit, which
Okay.
most people are when they
Yeah.
get out of the military. They're kind of like, because anybody who serves like an extended period of time on active duty, you know, they tell you exactly where to be, when to be there,
You're
and what you're
extremely
supposed to be doing.
structured. Your
You
day
know
is,
exactly
yep.
where you're supposed to be and where you lie in the hierarchy.
Which in a way I've
Yeah,
heard is kind of like a relief, right? To
yeah,
some extent,
yeah,
because you're
yeah,
just like, well, I know what I'm going to do every single day, so I
yeah.
don't ever have to worry about that.
I'm not picking out my clothes. Like
Right.
I'm just throwing a uniform on. I
Right.
know where I have to be, when I
Yeah.
have to be there, what uniform I gotta wear.
Yeah.
And so when you get out, you're like, I have no direction.
Yeah.
And actually, and I feel like personally, I think this is why a lot of people kind of get lost and have mental health issues and stuff because they have no purpose anymore.
Right.
It's really difficult to find that
Yes.
purpose in their life.
Absolutely. Well, that's the thing with older folks, right?
Mhm.
Whenever you see people retire, right, whatever
Mhm.
that means, when they stop working and they don't have a reason to get up every single day, you see their health just fall off a cliff
Yes.
because
Yeah.
it's like you have to have a purpose to get up. And so even if you're not working in a traditional job, you've got to have something that you're looking forward to get out of bed and go
Yeah.
do every day. And if you don't, it messes with your mental and your physical body.
And it can be anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh
it can
yeah.
be a garden. I
Yeah.
mean,
Absolutely.
whatever. It
Yeah.
can be
Just
anything.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just not a whole lot of nothing. So, so you kind of meandered for a little bit and then figured you'd,
Yeah.
dip your toe into real estate. Why'd you decide that?
Well, I was always interested. So I actually, the story goes when I was 19, before I even joined the army, I went and signed up for my real estate, my fundamentals class, the
Okay.
first one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I went and I think I attended like 3 or 4 classes and I
Right.
never finished it.
Right.
So it was something that I wanted to do. I was very interested in it. Man, I wish I'd have gotten in that time, 2007.
It'd been nice. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That was right before the crash, right
Uh-huh.
before all that. So yeah. But I never finished it. And then when I got out, I was working like a security job
Mhm.
overnight at a warehouse. And I remember going around like doing a little door check and I got real depressed. And I was like, this sucks. I was like, I'm doing nothing.
Right.
This sucks. I'm like, anybody can do this. Like you can train anybody to do this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I need to do something. And I was like, well, I was always interested in real estate.
Mhm.
And one, I feel it's really beneficial just to understand that world, even if you're not going to work in that area.
Yeah.
Like it's beneficial for normal people, everybody, just to understand like what you need to be qualified for a loan, like how the industry works, like because I don't know, it's just like I said, it's always
Well,
something
the
I've been
vast
interested in.
majority of
Yeah,
millionaires in this country or billionaires, they all something like 90% of them have most of their wealth in real estate.
yeah,
Like
real
that,
estate.
it is which is why it's depressing these days, because home prices have gotten so far out of control as far as like the average first
Yeah.
time home buyer to be able to afford something.
Mhm.
I tell all the time, when I bought my first house, was $130,000. This was in 2004. It was in Arlington over off Shorewood Drive, to 20 kind of 287 over there, right by the lake.
Mhm.
It was in a really nice neighborhood. About, I think it was like 17 or 1800 square feet. I think my rate at the time was like 6.5%. But that same house, I looked at it like 2 years ago, sold for like over $300,000.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy.
I actually feel kind of bad when I work with a first time home buyer, especially like a younger couple, younger
Yeah.
family. Sometimes I'm like, dang it, man. I hate having to tell them like, you got to wait, or like
Yes.
you need to save up some more money,
Yep.
or like, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do, or they qualify for so little that I'm having to show them like these little rinky dink
Yep.
like houses and not the best areas or whatnot. And I'm like, dang it, man, I feel terrible that they're having to settle for this. So
Well,
yeah, it's really kind of gotten out of control the last,
Well, the question I
couple
always
7 years.
ask people when I'm pre-qualifying them is, I'll say, okay, we go through the payments and kind of talk about what different components of the payment, what you can affect, what you can't, so they understand kind of how the payment's put together. But then I'll ask them, I was like, when you were thinking about buying a house, what's kind of your max level? Like what payment do you not want to exceed?
Mhm.
Like, and I ask it that way because we can always go down, but it gives me kind of a starting point. And it's like 95% of the people's answer. Guess, what do you think it is?
Don't want to go below.
No, don't want to go above this number. What do you think?
Probably 2,000.
$2,000.
Probably
That is the
2,000. That would say that
that
sounds
is
to me
like
right when everybody says 2,000. Yeah.
everybody says 2,000. That's
Yeah.
the, what is it? The is it not The Price is Right, but Family Feud, where they're like, we've
Yeah.
surveyed 100 people. What's the
Yeah.
number one answer? Yeah,
2,000
that's
probably.
it. And then when they put in the application that they were looking at a $350,000 house, and then I'm like, all right, so this is why we have to
Yeah.
understand why that ain't gonna happen,
Yeah.
But it's hard, and it's a sad state of affairs, just because home ownership, like we were talking about, is the one of the few paths to wealth for most average Americans. You buy
Yeah.
your house, you live in it for several years, you build equity in that home, then you can either sell it and upgrade to a bigger home or whatever. And then by the time, the idea is like by the time you're in your 60s or 70s, you've either owned your home outright or you have so
Yeah.
much equity that it helps you with retirement or whatever the case may be. But, now, because we're delaying household formations, people aren't even getting married and having kids till much later in life now.
Late 30s or
Yeah.
yeah.
And the fact that there's so few homes available for sale, and every market's different. Real estate is very local in that, the market in Chicago is very different from the market in Dallas. But here in this area, because there's so many people moving in, and because, did you know that in Tarrant County last year, half of the houses were bought by not by people?
I absolutely hate that statistic. I hate that statistic so much. The fact that there's like these huge corporate companies or corporations, whatever, they're buying up these houses
Yes.
just to park their money, or just to
Rent them
rent
out.
them out.
They're
Yeah,
cash flowed.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I wish that there was some way we could put a stop to it. Like definitely put a like just no more
There would have to be some
purchasing
type of
homes. Yeah.
legislation they put in, but then it gets into
Yeah.
the whole, you're infringing on someone's ability
Yeah, I
to,
know, yeah.
buy. I mean, but until they do something about it, that's just the situation that we're going to be in. And, I saw something the other day, home builders, they have slowed their building pace on single family residents. There's still a lot of apartment complexes and stuff being built,
Mhm.
but they slowed the single family residents, and their profit margins are huge. Like, they are way up.
Yeah.
So what they've done is they've shrunk the amount of homes they're building. Okay. Charge the same amount, even though costs of goods and everything has gone down. And now they've expanded their profit margins and they're loving it. So there's no way they're going back.
They're building less and making more.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Because there's no incentive for them to build a cheaper home, and that's, unfortunately, until things change. I mean, that's just what it is. But that's why, it's tough these days, because real estate is such a path to wealth that people can't get to, in a starting out stage, that unless you have a family member that's willing to help you with cash, or, you just happen to make a really good income, and have a low debt, it's tough. And, you know, that's why I tell people all the time, they're like, what, you know, is now a good time to buy? I'm like, yesterday was the best time to buy.
Yeah.
Cause it just keeps getting more expensive. It doesn't change. So, all right, so let's get into why I really had you here into this jiu-jitsu piece. So tell me a little bit about how you got into. I know you told me before we started you wrestled in high school,
Yes.
and I know from what I understand about the world, a lot of former wrestlers, that's kind of their general path is how they get into jiu-jitsu because very similar, you know, a lot of ways to it. So how did you get started? And then you just opened your own. Is it called a club? What's the right word for it? It's not a dojo, right?
I mean, it's a gym, but it's Crusader Combat Club, but
right.
I just called Combat Club because we have a couple of different, you know.
Oh, you have kickboxing and a few other things you do.
Mixed martial arts. We do some wrestling.
Gotcha. So how'd you get going down there?
So wrestled all through high school. And actually I feel like that made me a little cocky. Because I remember I wrestled and I was
now you know you can take people down.
Good at wrestling.
I'm not scared of you.
Okay. And then I fell out of it. I really didn't do anything. I joined the Army. I just got into working out basically to keep myself fit.
So in the Army, they didn't have, I guess at that time there wasn't much, because I think nowadays, isn't jiu-jitsu kind of a pretty big role or a pretty big piece of the training that they do, or am I crazy?
So the Army has their own hand-to-hand fighting system.
Okay.
It's called the Army Combatives Program, the Modern Army Combatives Program, MACP.
Okay.
And that is very jiu-jitsu heavy. There's a lot of jiu-jitsu mixed into that. There's some Muay Thai, there's some wrestling, some traditional Western boxing. They encompassed a lot of different martial arts in order to build that. But when they first started it actually did derive from the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. They had some Rangers, some guys from Washington go down into California and train with the Gracies for like, I think it was a year. I'm not sure the time frame. They spent a lot of time down there just training with them specifically to design the combatives program for the Army.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's how it started. And Matt Larson is the guy who started the combatives program. Shout out to Matt Larson. And so after I got in the Army, like I said, I was just kind of whatever working out. And then one day it was one of my good friends, and I'm still friends with him now. He's a fellow black belt. He invited me to a jiu-jitsu class when I got to Fort Hood, which is Fort Cavazos now. Right. Anyway, he was like, hey man, come try this out. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, whatever. And again, I had the little chip on my shoulder. Sure. I had done the modern, like the basic combatives program that they offer in the Army. And I did okay though, because I had the wrestling background. Yeah. So
you're feeling pretty good when you walk in the door. You're like,
I'll go check it out.
Show these guys what's up. Yeah.
And I did okay the first night there were other white belts, other first beginners.
Right.
And I'm doing okay against the other white belts because I'm taking them down. They can't submit me. I'm like, I don't need this. I was thinking like, I'm okay. And I remember there was this real skinny guy.
Yeah.
I think his name was Chris. And little guy, he's like 140 pounds, real lanky. And he was a blue belt, which is a step above a white belt.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to muscle this guy. I was like, okay, cool. He's like, yeah, you want to roll? I'm like, yeah, okay, man.
Let's go.
This guy choked me like 6 or 7 times. I mean, in 5 minutes, I couldn't stop him.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I need to do this. If this little skinny dude can work me over that way, this is something I need to learn.
So, okay. So I want you to talk about that a little bit. So talk about the jiu-jitsu as the art form itself, the martial art form itself, and why it's such because, with the advent of, or the popularity of the UFC and MMA coming to play, you see, it's not like jiu-jitsu just started. It's been around for a long time, but its popularity exploded after the UFC or after the UFC started. And from an outsider's point of view, it looked like that the reason that happened is because it didn't matter what other martial art you did, kickboxing, Muay Thai, regular old fashioned boxing. The winners for UFC in the beginning were all jiu-jitsu guys.
Well, yeah, that's how but that's also, there was a little bias in the beginning of the UFC too.
Okay.
Because the Gracie family actually started the UFC. And so they kind of,
gotcha.
There's a couple of good little documentaries you can watch where they kind of set it up for their guy to win.
Gotcha.
Like they kind of match made him to win it all. Well, it's okay. It exploded. It brought it over to the US. Sure. The cat was out of the bag. Everybody knew that like jiu-jitsu was the way to go.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons it became so popular was because it allowed for somebody who's not super athletic.
That's what I mean.
Who's not like, strong or big or whatever. They could use leverage and technique to defeat a larger opponent.
Right.
Or to defeat somebody who's a little bit faster, a little bit stronger than them.
Right.
And so it became, once the cat got out of the bag and everybody started training jiu-jitsu, now you've got like super athletes who are training jiu-jitsu. So like okay, you're a super athlete and you have this technique. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they're
Now,
gonna
now,
take it
now
down.
it's
Yeah,
tough. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
But now you have to, like, especially, fighters who are training to go fight or to compete,
Mhm.
they have to train jujitsu
Right,
only because they need to know the basics or else
right.
they're going to lose.
Because they
They're
get
going to get
taken
caught.
down, then you
Yeah.
can't
They're
get
going to get
out.
caught in something.
Yeah. So what is it about jujitsu specifically that makes it to where a bigger person can, or a smaller person can take down a bigger person? Or in
Yeah.
this case, obviously I'm trying to relate this to some degree to real estate.
Yeah.
And, I don't know the exact statistic, but the vast majority of realtors are women.
Mhm.
Right.
Yes.
So you're talking about a woman in a situation, or even a smaller guy that would go into, say, an open house by themselves. They're there often alone, and, bigger people are coming and going all the time. And there's a sense of I don't have control in this environment. If anything were to really go down, I'm in a situation, the agent is in that situation where they may not be able to defend themselves.
Mhm.
But jujitsu, for reasons you'll explain, is an art form that you can actually learn and be able to handle yourself in those situations, even when you do have someone that's out, that's bigger than you and stronger than you. If they don't have the same type of training, then you can have the upper hand in that situation, right?
Well, I think jujitsu just allows you to get what we call above the Joe line a little faster.
Okay, above the Joe
So
line.
we call the
I
Joe
like
line
average
is like
Joe.
the average Joe. So
Okay,
and it's the fighting prowess of the average Joe.
gotcha,
And so when about 6 to 8 months of training, like consistently in like jujitsu, you can get above the Joe line
gotcha.
to where you know a little bit more than the average person. Because it doesn't really matter what martial art you're training as long as there's a live sparring component to it.
Right,
So you're actually able to pressure test your techniques
right,
because there's a couple legitimate martial arts and the you can really tell the difference between something that's very legitimate and something that's kind of like a little bit of some bullshit, like a little bit of BS.
right,
And that's that there's no live sparring component to like those BS martial arts.
right.
Like if you're
You don't want to say what the BS
yeah.
martial arts
Well,
are?
I'm just there are some out there, but and it's debatable. Some people are like, oh
Sure,
man,
sure.
don't talk
Well, I
about
mean,
my stuff.
karate's
But
picked on a lot, right?
yeah,
Because a lot of the karate, the actually karate,
yeah,
that art is a lot of what do they call it? Where you're just
kata,
yeah, yeah,
where they're just doing. But there's actually a very like tough. Like there's some like portions of karate that are very credible. Where they're doing full contact. They're sparring on a regular basis. And
yeah,
again, that's the difference. If you go to a gym and you're like, I'm looking to really learn to defend myself, or I'm looking to really have confidence walking around to where I could handle myself in a situation.
right,
You have to look at like, are they live sparring?
right,
Are they pressure testing their techniques? And this is one of the reasons why it's who some forms of karate, judo are very popular for those like people who are looking for self defense or
right,
looking to handle themselves. Because I'm testing this against someone who is 100% resisting me.
right.
So again, we're learning a technique and like, okay, I'm not just going to learn the technique and then practice it over and over
By
again.
myself, yeah,
Yeah, I'm not going to punch a board or whatever.
right.
Yeah, no, I'm practicing this combination or I'm this joint lock or this choke or whatever against somebody who is 100% resisting trying or to, and so I'm able to employ that technique against somebody who's
So how would you, if someone came to you and had no idea what jujitsu was,
Mhm.
I've never heard of this. What is this thing? How would you describe it to them, especially in the nature of self-defense? So if you had an agent that came to you and said, "Hey, Manny, I really want to learn how to defend myself with jujitsu, but what is it? I don't understand." Like, talk to me like I'm 3 years old. How would you explain it to somebody?
okay. And because I work with very young kids
Yeah,
every day. So
yeah,
uh the best way I can always describe it is jujitsu, to me, in my opinion, is the best form of self defense because we
okay,
have to establish what self defense is before
right,
we talk about fighting and self defense. There's two different things.
okay,
Fighting is you and I both make a conscious decision. We're going to stand here or we're going to engage in mutual combat.
right,
We're going to fight.
right,
Self defense is like the best form of self defense is for me to get out of the situation, to
correct,
run away.
right,
So I have to defend myself when I can no longer run away,
right,
when someone is holding me, grabbing me. And what's that? That's grappling.
gotcha,
So if you're not allowing me to run away, and I know we just talked about it a few seconds ago, like a lot of women have those reservations about training.
mhm.
And we say like the industry is really dominated by women. Um, Again, if something's going to happen, it's not going to be like,
From a
hey, yeah,
distance,
it's not going to be like, hey, you over there, stand
yeah,
there. Like I'm
right,
going to come and attack you low. It's going to be a pretty violent situation. At first, they're going to grab you
yeah,
and you have to learn, you have to know, how to work those grips, how to use your underhooks, how to use leverage, how to use your body weight.
And you don't have time to think in those situations. Your body just has to react.
Your body just has to do it.
Right.
So if you're not consistent, consistency is one of the main things, whether you're training Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, Jiu Jitsu, any of those, consistency, and then the live sparring component. I'm practicing every day, making sure my technique works. I'm pressure testing my technique.
Well, with the live sparring, from what I understand too, again, being an idiot in most of this, but it's a little different than, say, if we were boxing, right? Mm-hmm. If I'm boxing with you, I got a, headgear on, and boxing, I'm still getting knocked around a little bit, but maybe not quite to the extent, because you're kind of just sparring a little bit. And maybe you're going 85%, right? Or 75%.
That's a little high for boxing.
Right. Okay. Even less than that.
Yeah. You should go about 50, 60.
Right. So you're trying to keep it low, so you're not giving each other concussions and all that kind of stuff. Right. But with jiu-jitsu, I mean, you're trying to get submissions. So you're going as hard as you can go for the most part, right? Because you're taking someone to the point of submission essentially, and then letting them tap out, and then it's over with, as opposed to taking them down.
Yes. So you can test the technique, and then I can safely tap my opponent or tap my partner and let them know, okay, the technique works.
Right.
And so you can, and it happens too, like you might tap too late and somebody might go to sleep, or somebody might, but the good thing is you just wake up and you're fine. Yeah. Like, okay, I missed the tap. My bad.
I tried to hold on a little too long. Whoops.
It happens quite a bit.
Oh, does it really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Because everybody, it always feels
they don't want to give up.
Well, it always feels like you're just about to slip out. You're just about, because I've been put to sleep a few times too.
Okay.
And so every time you get put to sleep, you always feel like you're just about to escape. I'm just about to slip my head out. And then you wake up.
Yes.
And I remember once actually, somebody had a collar choke on me, and I was turning. And I remember I was like, my head's going to pop out any second now. And I turned to them. I escaped. And then I explained, like, hey, you really need to pinch your elbow down when you're putting that choke on. It would help out to, keep me in there. And then I woke up, and I had a whole dream.
About telling them how to fix it.
I was like, dang.
Oh, damn, you got me.
So, but yeah, it's really safe in that we can go 100%.
Full speed.
Yeah, we can go full speed. And then once you're caught in a submission or one of the techniques, you can just acknowledge that it works, and we start over.
Is it true that, and I don't, again, I'm knowing very little about this, but there are certain techniques, certain holds, grips, whatever you want to call them, that, let's call them the basics. There's a few basic ones that you can do. And when you have somebody that's starting off, that's brand new, you kind of drill those just over and over and over and over again, because if it's a self-defense situation, like we just said a minute ago, you don't have time to think where you can, okay, well, if I do this, but your body just has to react to a certain extent, and it can't react unless you drill it over and over and over again. Yes. Is that a fair statement?
So this is one of the misconceptions that normal people have. People who have no idea what martial arts are, they've never trained. They always, they have that Dunning-Kruger effect where they overestimate their ability.
Right.
They think, like, I'm going to rise to the occasion.
Right.
We never rise to the occasion. We fall to our lowest level of training.
Right.
So even if now, like, if I got into a situation where I had to use some of my technique or some of the skill that I learned, I would use the very basic stuff. I'd probably just go like basic double leg takedown, go to the mount, do something super simple that I've drilled like a million times.
Right.
It would be the very basics.
Yeah.
So again, you're going to fall to your lowest level of training. And for most people, that training is zero.
Right. Yes.
So they fall into flailing their arms and screaming or whatever, or they're swinging for the fences, throwing big haymakers, and
throws your balance all off.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. You fall to positions. That lowest level.
Well, have you ever read the book? There's a book called Atomic Habits. Have you ever read that?
No.
So one of and I don't think he came up with it. It came from somebody else, but there's a saying in the book, that he references many times, that people don't reach to or have the success to the level of their goals. They fail to the level of their systems. Essentially, that you fall when you put in a process and a system in place that you use on a daily basis. As long as you're good at that system, you'll always maintain that. But to achieve this higher level, it's like you can wish and dream for it, but you have to create systems and planning to build you to that point, because you're always going to fail to the level of your systems.
Yes.
It's the same concept as we all think, like you said, if I was in that situation,
I see red.
That's right. But your adrenaline gets going, your brain's not functioning. Like people that have never been, you've been in combat situations for real. And, when you were in Iraq. And so when you have people that have never even heard a gunfire, go off, or been in a fight in their life, and they think in their mind, they're going to turn into Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah.
You know, it ain't going to work out like that.
That's again, a lot of people they think like, I'm going to have time to think. You're not going to have time to think. Your body, either you're trained or you're untrained.
Right.
So either your body's going to react or it's not.
Right.
And so the only thing that matters, and a lot of times, and us as agents, we have to go and I remember going into open houses or whatever by myself, and that's cool, whatever. But also there's been a couple of times where I didn't have to use anything, but it was a little bit, my gut told me something was off, or like there was almost something like, man, I feel something's off, or the hair stood up on the back of my neck, like something's going on.
Yeah.
And I remember like I met a client one night about 8:30. It was like in the winter time, so it was dark. It was supposed to be a vacant house, and I remember opening the door and turning the light on, and there's a guy standing in the kitchen looking at me in a wife beater, a muscle shirt, and of course I conceal carry as well, so I carry a gun everywhere I'm. And so I'm like, we just stood there looking at each other, and I'm like, you supposed to be here? And he was like, oh, I'm so-and-so. I'm related to the seller.
Sure.
So I called the agent and was like, hey, this guy's here. And they called me back and was like, okay, that is.
Okay.
But I remember thinking like,
but you never know.
Oh yeah. Oh snap. Something like, who's this guy? Like standing there, and he was a big dude. And like I said, he's just standing there like in his boxers and a wife beater in the kitchen looking at me. And I'm like, all right, well, let's get this sorted out. Again, but I was confident in that situation. I was like, my body immediately started like, I remember thinking like, I grabbed my jacket. I grabbed the end of my jacket because I was thinking like, okay, well, if I got to, draw my gun, then I'm going to have to, swing my jacket back or whatever. Luckily, of course, I just said, hey, what's going on, man?
Yeah.
What's up with you? Which is usually the best way out of any situation.
Yes.
Is to verbally like, hey, let's solve this with words.
Well, like I've heard before in, when it comes to even somebody that's training in, say they're trained in jiu-jitsu, there's always somebody better, right? And so it's like this, you even get to some extent that you were telling a story earlier about how, before we went on air, about how you were, or maybe I guess you just said it, when you were a white belt, you went into spar, and then you went up against a skinny guy that's a blue belt, and he kicked your butt.
He worked me over.
Yeah. And so you may have a little bit of training and understanding of what to do, but especially nowadays, you don't know what you're going up against. If someone decides they want to pop off, they might be a black belt and they're about to take you down. You have no idea.
And you never know what anybody is capable of.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that everybody has to go out there and become Jason Bourne. Like you don't need to go out there but you need to be capable
of escaping, right?
Yeah. Of violence. Basically, you have to be capable of committing a little bit of violence in your own defense.
Yes.
Because those who are capable of violence will always be subjected to those who are not.
Correct.
Or those who are not capable of violence will always be subject to those who are.
There's another, is it Sun Tzu? I think it's a book that I read one, and it's
The Art of War.
Yeah. Okay. Where it's the, you don't want to be a gardener in a war. You want to be a warrior in a garden.
Yes.
Essentially saying that, like, I have the ability to do these things, but I don't need to.
Yeah.
Right. Versus getting into the situation and not having those tools.
And there's, like I said, there even doesn't matter because most people, I recommend like carry a gun.
Yeah.
But don't carry a gun and then just think like, oh, I'm going to go to my gun if I have to. Like,
it's a last resort.
Well, most people, that's how they think. If they carry a little gun, they're going to think like, well, I'm going to have my gun. I have my gun. We used to have a saying. So I was teaching the combatives program. I was an instructor for like 2 years before I got out of the Army.
Okay.
I was teaching down at Fort Hood. And one of the sayings, and I remember our head instructor used to always tell us, like, if there's two people in a room and you have a gun and the other person has training, the person with the training is going to end up with the gun.
Right.
I was like, so that's just the
true.
Fact of the matter.
Yes.
So most people will carry, like, they'll conceal carry a pistol, and they'll think like, well, if anything happens, I'm just going to pull out my pistol. Well, listen, I'm faster than you. I'm stronger than you. And I know the concept of leverage.
Yep.
And so I'm going to take that gun if I wanted it. So if you're going to carry, like, that's cool, but go to the range every month and go get accurate with that gun, or practice drawing from your holster, or align your hobbies with your survival.
Right.
Because the only thing that's going to matter, if you ever put in that situation where, you have to defend yourself or you have to defend your family, nothing's going to matter at that moment except for how well prepared you are.
Right.
How much preparation went into that moment.
Right.
And look, if nothing ever happens, you go to your grave. Awesome.
Yeah.
Guess what? I had a cool hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
spent my life,
Yeah.
I had a little bit of practice and I'm
Yeah.
proficient,
Yeah.
something I can pass on. But if that time comes,
You're ready.
nothing's going to matter.
Right.
Nothing else is going to matter except for how well prepared you are.
So when you start training people that come in brand new, whether it be, even like younger kids and women specifically too, where do you kind of start? Like what's the basis for where you start?
The basis is learning the positions, like
Okay.
so positional grappling, like what is the dominant position, what is the non-dominant position,
Okay.
what is a terrible place to be stuck.
Right.
So I always normally start with like how to escape the mount. And so the mount
Someone
is
has your back,
described,
basically. Is that
no, the mount is described like you're laying, let's say you're on the ground
okay?
and someone's sitting on your chest.
Okay.
And so with their knees like
I'll
underneath
hold
your
you down.
armpits. Yeah, they're
Right.
holding you down. And this is one of the worst positions to be in.
Right.
Of course, because I can throw punches, I can,
Right.
Choke you, whatever. And so that's normally if somebody's brand new and they're looking to start, like, I want to learn to defend myself, I'll normally teach them how to escape the mount.
Okay.
Like, okay, why? Because again, first line of self-defense, run away.
Right.
I was like, that's the best self-defense we can. And we're distinguishing self-defense between fighting.
Okay.
Self-defense, I always want to run away.
Right. You're just trying to get away from the situation.
Yeah, I don't want to be
get out
there.
of there?
Yeah.
Right.
But if we get into a tussle, somebody gets on top, I need to know how to get out from underneath them and then run away.
So obviously when you're teaching this, you're describing this, you're showing this on the mat, and that's, this is a hard place to do that, but how would you, with words, describe how somebody would get out of that?
Well, the concept is to take away a post or to take away posts. So normally when we're going to roll away from somebody, they're going to post out with their arm or their leg to keep you from rolling them.
Okay.
So when you can trap an arm and a leg and then you roll that direction, you take away their ability to post. And then once you can get on top, then it's your ability to press, create distance and get away.
Gotcha.
And so in teaching combatives, I have that unique experience where I was able to teach that modern army combatives to soldiers.
Yeah.
And also go take that into jiu-jitsu. So a lot of the combatives program is focused on creating distance, because in the army and as soldiers, we're taught to use our primary weapon first.
Mm-hmm.
So we're using a rifle or our secondary weapon, which could be a pistol, could be a knife, could be whatever. So combatives mainly focuses in the beginning and then those very, very beginners levels, like the basics. They teach you to create distance to get to a primary weapon.
Gotcha.
And so one thing I recommend for especially people who decide to conceal carry is that they learn how to create distance first.
Okay.
Because I never want to show my cards until I have to, I never want
to. You don't
show
want them
something
to know that you have a gun
Yes.
until you're enough separation that you can use it.
I'm able to use it.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't want to be I'm about to get my gun while you're grabbing me.
Yeah.
Because like you said, if they're faster, better, whatever, they're going to take it from you anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so I know that was one of the concepts that we really we really drilled into their head, was create distance first. So there's a lot of pummeling. We were always using and I always used to tell people, and I still say this the other day, I actually said this to my kids' class. I was like, because for some reason, we as people, as natural, we always grab people's heads. You always see a headlock.
Right.
Every time you watch, just Google or YouTube any street fight, you're going to see someone throw on a headlock.
Hey, big text, Nolan Ryan. That's how you beat the crap out of Ventura, right?
And I tell people all the time, if I can just use an underhook, if I can just put my arm underneath your armpit as opposed to going to the head, I can almost double my fighting prowess. If I can just learn to do that every time, instead of grabbing the head, I go underneath the armpit, because then I can drive your shoulder line. I can get you off balance. Then you can almost double your fighting prowess.
And you're kind of taking away a limb too that could be coming at you for whatever reason, I guess.
And so I know I've done this a couple of times. I did a seminar with the Cedar Hill Police one time, where I was showing them you take that underhook on the same side. Not only am I taking your shoulders off your center line, but I'm also protecting my gun side, where I'm wearing my pistol.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm here, I'm turning to you, so you can no longer reach for my pistol. If I had to create distance from there, I'm just going to push you off, get your shoulders off center line. Of course, this stuff is not something, and another huge misconception is that people take these seminars. I'm going to take a self-defense seminar.
Right.
And you may learn a good technique, one or two good techniques, but if you're not practicing that consistently, you're not going to remember. No. It's going to be a flash, because the way things happen, the way incidents happen, violence happens very fast, and it ends very fast. It's very quickly, or very quick. So in that moment, in that instant, your body has to react, because it's going to happen and it's going to end just like that.
Right.
as quickly as a gunshot,
Right.
that it's over.
Well, and I think the thing about this too is, we're talking about it from the point of view of self-defense, obviously, but you know, it's great exercise as well,
Yeah.
because when you put that much effort forth, when you're rolling on a regular basis,
Mhm.
once or two or three times a week, how often you do it, it's a great way to keep in shape as well. And it's like, if I can develop a skill that's going to keep me healthy, and
Yeah.
I'm going to develop a skill that's going to save me in a time of need.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like a pretty good little marriage of of activities to do, right?
But it's also a huge blow to your ego.
Yeah,
That's one of the things and I've been on a philosophy kick the last couple of years.
I
And
love it.
so one of my favorite things is like, Miyamoto Musashi, like the guy, he's the best swordsman, recorded as the best swordsman ever in Japan, wrote the Book of Five Rings.
5 rings, yep.
One things that he says about martial arts is when they're trained, you train martial arts properly, they get to carry over into every other facet of your life.
That's the once you know the way, generally you see it in all things.
Yes.
Is that the
Yeah.
the quote? Yeah.
Yeah. And so that practice like every day, and then you're showing up, you're training, like that carries over. So I always say, like, when you're fighting or you're grappling, you're sparring, whatever, it's almost like, and I said this the other day, it's life summed up in within 3 to 5 minutes. Because in that whole little scuffle, I mean, you're going through emotions, you're
Right.
getting your ego checked.
Yeah.
I mean, most people who are, they overestimate their ability, or they really think they've never been humbled.
Right.
And so they've never been beaten up and be like, dang, there's nothing I can do.
Right.
And so that's one of the benefits also of jujitsu, is that you're never an expert.
Right.
There's always somebody, even if they just have your number, they just know
Yes.
exactly what you're going to do. Or they pair up with you perfectly.
Right.
There's always going to be somebody who's just a little bit better than you.
And you're physically reminded of it when you go in and do it
Yes.
too, because you get submitted.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not just something that's it's a fictional thing. Oh yeah, there's always,
Yeah.
because we say that all the time with kids. No matter how hard you practice, there's always going to be somebody better than you. So
Yeah.
just know that. But they don't always get to experience that. But if you roll on a regular basis and you go to these gyms, wherever that may be, then you're going to experience that, because someone is going to submit you.
Yeah.
When you're in the gym.
Be humble or get humbled.
Right.
And so that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, and we were talking about exercise a second ago, like, marrying the two between exercise and learning a skill. One of the things about the exercise portion of that is, I always say, like, getting fit is kind of like an after effect. That's just kind of like an added benefit.
Right. You're trying to survive.
Yeah. Learning the skill is most like
Mhm.
is the biggest benefit to it. But as you get better, you get less fit.
Right.
And so I say that because the better you get at controlling somebody, the less I'm having to work.
Gotcha.
So there's a stereotype of like in the jujitsu community of like the fat brown belt.
Right.
Brown belt's like the belt right before you get to black belt.
Right.
And
Right.
so they say the fat brown belt, because brown belts aren't working very hard.
Right.
They're putting people on their back, and then they're resting, and then they're like controlling. They know exactly what you're going to do. They've been training for so long, because I think, black belt, you're 8 to 10 years. So right around brown belt, you should be training like 6, 7, 8 years. So you're very experienced. So you're going with these beginners and you're putting them on their back, and you're just kind of like, you're resting, you're hanging out. You're not working as hard as you were when you were a white belt or a blue belt.
Because you've done this before. You've been down the road. Yeah.
So that there's a stereotype with that fat brown belt. We're like, okay, well, now the better I get at jujitsu, the more I have to work outside of the gym. Now I have to start running, or I got to start lifting weights, or I got to start doing something, because I'm not working as hard as I was.
Well, I've heard it compared to like chess, where you're in a situation to where, I would guess, I don't know, but I would think that somebody that's inexperienced in that kind of, hand-to-hand combat is probably going to do the same. Like, people are going to generally do the same type of things, whatever those things are. They're going to react in a similar way, not always the same, but in a similar way. So if you expect, if I grab them here, they're probably going to do this. And if I grab them here, then they're probably going to do that.
Yeah.
You're kind of anticipating moves as you go through. You say, well, I'm going to go here, and then they're going to do that. And then I'm going to go here, and then I got them. Yes. Right. And there's kind of like a step by step, because you've done it so many times, your body's just like, oh yeah, I've seen this before. He's going to put his arm there. I'm going to grab him there and turn him over or whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
It's very strategic.
Right.
Like, it is. I always say it's like speed chess.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving back and forth, back and forth. I know, where you're going to roll, which way, which direction. And also controlling your weight, like understanding where I'm placing my weight. This is one thing I explain, especially I had a smaller female who used to train with me. She was like 110 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be like, hey, listen, if I pick up a 110-pound dumbbell, that joker's heavy. Like, go pick up a 110-pound dumbbell in the
Yeah.
gym. I was like, so what you need to do is take all of your weight and focus it in one location. I was like,
Gotcha.
because then, even then, and there's one guy who trains with me in the morning. He's like huge, big guy. He's like 300 something pounds. And I always tell him, like, man, once you learn how to focus that weight, you're going to crush people.
Right.
Because right now, when you're that big, you're so used to carrying your own weight. You're not trying to lay on people or crush
Right.
them. I was like, but once you learn how to focus, you put all of your weight in one central location, you can crush people with 120 pounds, 150 pounds,
Mhm.
like I'm like 165, and I always try to imagine like putting all of my weight in one fingertip.
Right.
And that's how I try to grapple, like put all of my weight down or center it around one point.
One point of their body.
Mhm.
So if anybody was starting off training, what do you think it takes? Like, how many days a week? How often? Like, what does the process look like to get to where you could be, let's just call it somewhat proficient, not an
Yeah.
expert, but just enough, like in a couple of moves that have just like, okay, I know how to do
Yeah.
these two things. So if anybody ever grabbed me, I
Yeah.
can at least do that.
Above the Joe line.
Above the Joe line.
Above the Joe line.
Yes.
So I would say 3 times a week, for about 6 to 8 months.
Okay.
And then you'll start to see, I'm not going to say you're going to be above the Joe line, but
Right.
you'll start to see the difference. You'll see the split. We're like, okay, I'm understanding. Like, at that point, you understand leverage.
Right.
Like, okay, I understand that I need to put my arm somewhere. And so there's a huge difference between somebody who has no training
Mhm.
and somebody who has
A little training.
8 months to a year of training.
Right.
Because again, at that point, they're starting to understand leverage. They're starting to understand how to manipulate their own body weight,
Yeah.
or move somebody else's body weight, use momentum to their advantage.
Well, it's similar. I tell realtors all the time that start off brand new,
Mhm.
because you have this, as a new agent, even a new loan officer, some people have what they call imposter syndrome, where
Mhm.
you know some stuff, but you don't feel like you're an expert. So
Mhm.
you have this insecurity about talking about it, And I always tell them, like, look, even if you've only been doing real estate for 6 months, 1,000% more than the average person.
You're way above the Joe line.
You're way above the
You're
Joe
way
line.
above the Joe line.
So
Yeah.
same situation, right?
And actually, it's helped me a lot. Jiu-jitsu has helped me a lot in real estate, because I was training. Let me see, when did I start training? 4 years before I got my license,
Mhm.
before I got out of the army. Um, and so trusting the process is a huge part of real estate, because those who just get into it, just get into the business, they understand, like, okay, I'm not receiving a paycheck.
Yes.
There's no guarantee.
Right.
I'm kind of working through this. Like, I'm blind. I'm in the wind. There's not really a whole lot of mentorship unless you find the right people. You got to connect yourself to the right people. And jujitsu helped me, just because I'm like, I trust the process. I know that there's, like, even if I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel,
Yep.
I trust the process. So I know if I show up every day and I make some phone calls, or I know if I try to meet the right people,
It works out.
yeah, it's going to work out. Same
Yeah.
thing with that. When you start jujitsu and you're a white belt and you have no idea what you're doing, like,
Yeah.
I got to trust the process. I got to show up to practice. I got to do my little hip escapes, my little drills. I got to practice. I got to find a couple of moves that I like. I got to trust the process and keep practicing, because every day it's gonna work out eventually.
Yeah.
And so that helped me in jujitsu, or in real estate, where I was like, okay, got to trust the process. Got to show up to the office. Got to make a phone call. Got to
I
get
think everybody
online.
experiences that to some extent when they're young. And this is the problem with being young, when, and you realize as you get older, like, I was an idiot back then. But, I'd always had this problem of doing things, and I'd see somebody doing a job or see somebody running a business, and I'd be like, oh, I could do that. And I could do that. And, like, that doesn't seem that hard. You could get in there and do that right away. But the further along in life you get and the more experiences you have with different things, you start to realize that it takes years for anything for you to be really good at it.
Yeah.
And, if you try to dabble in this and dabble in that and dabble in this, and it's kind of the jack of all trades, master of none. But the idea is, like, no matter what the activity is, whether it's real estate or jujitsu or mortgages or whatever, you have to put time and effort into the process and develop a system in order to have success at it, because you're not going to have success at it right out of the gate. It just doesn't work that way. Or you may, but it would be limited success, and or it's not real and it's not sustained. And anything that you're going to do is going to take time, and you can't become an expert at something right away, which is why a lot of times you kind of have to narrow your focus to things that if you're in real estate, be in real estate, learn everything there is to know about that. If you're in, if you're going to be if you're going to run a gym, you can do that as well. But once you start getting to 4 and 5 and 6 other things that you're trying to be, the best at, there's just not enough time in the day or hours in the day to do that.
Mm-hmm. And actually, one of the big ways to help with that is to relate everything to some things you already know.
You're right.
Yeah. So like, and again, like jujitsu helped me in real estate where I was like, okay, got to trust the process.
Yep.
I know I got to drill every day. So I was saying like, I know I am drilling my positional drills every day, or I'm drilling these submissions every day. So I kind of took that over into real estate. Like, what's my drill?
Right.
What am I drilling?
Right.
Like, okay, until today, I'm going to focus on calling internet prospects.
Right.
And then the next week, maybe I'm going to focus on getting the word out, scheduling, doing something, or go working an open house, or like, what's the process?
How does that look like when I go to the open house? What do I need to do? That's the backwards planning, right? Okay, I'm going to be there. People are going to come in. I need to have a place to sign in or get their information. I need to be able to talk about this particular house and what the features are. So I need to know what it is. So I need to go look at it first, figure all that out.
And then when you get there, that's the live sparring portion.
Right.
Now I'm sparring. Now I'm not, this is live now.
Right.
In front of
because people are coming in. Now I gotta know what I'm saying.
In front of somebody and and that imposter syndrome still comes up. I feel like no matter how much of an expert you are, you're always going to suffer or deal with that imposter syndrome.
Well, but I think that's good. I think that, the idea that anybody knows everything about anything is crazy, right? I mean, there's always room for improvement. There's always stuff that you can learn at a deeper level. And to ever get to the point, I've been doing mortgages for 12 years and I feel like I do pretty well at it, but there are still plenty of things that somebody will call me and ask me a question. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, well, this is the answer. But then the other part of my head goes, well, wait, hang on. Are you sure? Like, are you sure that's the answer? Because you thought this other thing was the answer last week and it wasn't. So I'm like, let me double check on that. And like, I even tell my kids all the time is if anybody ever says to you, oh, this is absolutely what you got to do. And this is absolutely like, don't listen to that person.
Double check.
Double check.
Go double check. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That imposter syndrome is it still comes up even after you've had experience. Like, again, jiu-jitsu and real estate are like 1-on-1 for me. I'm always thinking like how I can carry one over into the other because I learn from both.
Yeah.
And that to this day, I'll be teaching a class and I'm like, I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Why am I teaching this? This is so dumb. I'm so stupid. So the other thing, so I mentioned Dunning-Kruger a little earlier, like the Dunning-Kruger effect. And there's two sides to that. I watch this entire video. I get into these rabbit holes sometimes where I watch these psychology videos or whatever. So the Dunning-Kruger effect, for those who don't know, it's when somebody like they assume that they're way more competent than they actually are because they've seen a couple of videos. Let's say I've seen a couple of videos or I've watched some UFC fights.
Yeah, I've watched fights. I know what they do.
Or my my sister's best friend's, cousin or whatever bought a house and they told me how it went. So I know exactly how the process works. So they assume that they're very competent in that field. Well, the other side, the flip side to that is that those who are incredibly skilled at something, they underestimate their competence.
Yes.
They always think that like, oh man, they think everybody else has the same knowledge that they have.
Yes.
And so they underestimate their competence.
Yes.
And so there's two sides to that Dunning-Kruger effect. And so that's where that imposter syndrome comes in a lot. A lot of times we forget most of the knowledge that we even have because we assume that everybody knows it.
Right. Like, if I know it, then everybody else must understand it as
like
well.
If I get to, for me, like if I'm teaching back control and I'm like, okay, I'm going to back control. I'm trapping the hand and I'm going here. I'm attacking the choke and then I'm pointing my elbows down, whatever. And then I look and people are like, they're staring at me.
Slow
like
down. Can you do that again?
And I'm like, oh, you don't know. It's like, so let me look, this is my foot. This is where I'm going to, I think helping or teaching children, like very young children has helped me a whole lot in teaching in general.
I always advocate to my kids. Like one of the things I'm trying to get my daughter, she's 15 years old right now. And she's a volleyball player and she's actually within the last year or so has gotten pretty good and is getting, maybe an option for her to play in college. We'll see, you never know how that goes. But one of the things I'm telling her is like, you need to go to a gym, to a volleyball club, and you need to figure out how you can coach. Mm-hmm. How can I find a younger group of kids to coach? Because when you understand the game at a level that you can explain it to a child at their level, then, then you really got it.
Yeah.
It's the whole, and I think it's always been attributed to Albert Einstein, but I don't know if it actually came from him. Whereas if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, basically, then you don't really fully understand it.
Yeah.
And that's I think so critical in learning. They have those different methods of learning where you listen, you write, you repeat, and then you teach. Because if you can teach and you can explain, your depth of knowledge gets so much greater than you're so far above the Joe line at that point that it's so much easier for you to then retain that knowledge and understand it to your core, to where it's not even something you even have to think about. You just know it, right?
It's ingrained in you.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you teach something, you learn it twice.
Correct.
And that's one thing that I have the benefit of right now is teaching those very young children. Like I have 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, look, guys, our legs are going to go here.
Right.
I was like, and this, look, watch my feet. Look where I put them.
Yep.
And like, I'm explaining it. And I feel like sometimes I'll be teaching adults and I'll get back into that kid mode and I'll be like, I realize, okay, they understand. Like, they got it. They got it.
Well, but then you learn with kids too. Cause I taught kids for years. I taught, coached all kinds of sports and ran a swim school for kids. So it's been my whole life pretty much. But what you find working with kids too, is that you will tell them something and you've said the right words. Like I explained this and they're doing something completely different than what you said. And you're like, wait a minute. How is this not clear? Like I said, here's what I want. And then so you have to go back to your own mind and break down, okay, what are they thinking about? What did I not say right? And then you got to try a bunch of different ways to explain the same thing. Right. And then you finally get to a point where it's like, oh, okay, he understands it. But then you have this other kid and you tell him the same way and then he doesn't understand it either. And you're like,
kids learn differently.
They all
learn differently.
Yes.
And some days you have to pick your battles.
Yes.
So you have to just be like, all right, well, look, you put your hand in the right place.
Yeah.
We're just going to call that a win for the day.
It's like dealing with a buyer and seller, right?
Like, yeah, that's it. It's same thing. Yeah. Managing expectations is also, that was also great. Like a carryover for me from jiu-jitsu into real estate. Because that's basically your job as an agent. You're trying to, so somebody who has no idea how the transaction works. So it's cool every once in a while. I'm thankful for like a buyer or a seller who knows exactly how the transaction goes. Like, oh yeah, we bought 4 or 5 houses. We know we know how much earnest money we want to put down. We know what kind of loan we're using. We already have a loan officer we've used for whatever, or let's say, or maybe we do this, whatever. Okay, cool. That's awesome. I'm grateful for those transactions. But the majority of them are people like, listen, I don't know
what I'm doing.
Anything. I have a 500 credit score and I have like $7 in the bank and I want to buy a house tomorrow.
Right.
Like I've been looking on Zillow and look, this is what I want.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well then let's start at square one. Right. Let's manage our expectations here.
That's right.
And so I have to do that a lot, especially with those younger fighters or younger people who come in and they're like, I'm going to be a world champion. Yeah. I'm like, why don't we focus on learning how to hip escape down the mat first? Or why don't we let me show you how to tie your belt first? Why don't we
put your pants on one leg at a time?
Let's manage our expectations a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that's another great carryover from real estate into jiu-jitsu and jiu-jitsu into real estate. Like you manage people's expectations. And sometimes you have to tell them the hard truth. Yeah. Same thing with a buyer, or I experience it more with buyers than anything, where you got to tell them the hard truth. And I also have to do that sometimes with athletes, where I'm like, hey, listen, we're not the most athletic. All right. You're not the most athletic person. Okay. Right. I'm just going to give it to you straight. All right. You don't hit very hard.
Right.
So let's work on something to your advantage. Let's try to find another strength.
Right.
And so the same thing with like a buyer. I'd be like, well, listen, you're not in the neighborhood that you want to be in. Okay. So let's start looking outside of your area. Like
expand a little bit and see what we can do.
Maybe settle for somewhere outside of the city or like a little further out or wherever.
So what all do you at your, so tell everybody what your club's called, where it's located, and then what you guys offer there, and how, if you wanted to get started training, what that would look like.
Okay. So it's Crusader Combat Club. We are located at the Tyler Station in Oak Cliff, which is at 1300 South Polk Street. We are Suite 225. You can find us online, crusadercombatclub.com. Okay. In order to start training, I always recommend people just show up for a class. I think that's a little difficult because I know a lot of people have those reservations about just coming in.
Right. I've never done this before. I'm looking a fool.
I get those. Yeah. They're scared to look like a fool. We all look like a fool when we first started. We all look dumb.
Yeah.
Everybody was a white belt at one point.
Yeah.
And so, cause I get those online inquiries all the time and I call them, they're like, what do I need to do? And I'm like, I said, well, let me ask what program. And then I said, just show up. And they're like, oh, dang. I thought there was going to be, most of the time, once you eliminate the obstacle, people who are not serious about it go, oh, well, I'm busy that day.
Yes, of
Or my
course.
kids
Yeah.
are doing it.
Yep.
Like there's no more obstacles. You
No.
just come in.
Just got to get there.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
oh dang, I thought it was gonna be tougher. I thought there's gonna be like a form.
I was going to have a reason. Oh, I couldn't because I wasn't ready. My shoulders messed up.
There's a built-in excuse. Like,
instead of I'm just a wuss and I don't want to go.
So yeah, once you eliminate those, just show up. Just
Yeah.
come into a class. You get a free week trial, so they can come in try all the classes for 7 days. We offer Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu twice a day for adults. We have kids 5 to 12 years old. Kickboxing. We do kickboxing Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. We have wrestling Friday nights and mixed martial arts on Saturday. So MMA.
Okay, cool. How long have you had? How long have you been open now?
About 8 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like if someone gets a membership, about how much does that cost? Like if they're doing it, because I would assume most gyms, like you do like a monthly membership, right?
Yeah, it's a monthly membership. It's $120 for the month, and that includes unlimited training, so they can attend all the classes they want for $120. And if they want to add like a family member, they can do that for like an additional $100. They can throw their kids on. Let's say they want to train and they will have a kid they want to train. It'll be like $220 for them and their kid.
Do you see people come in by themselves and then like the ones that like it, do they start showing up with like bringing their kid and their friend? And
normally what you see is a parent has their kid training and the parent is interested.
Right.
And they'll be like, I'm going to come into an adults class.
Yeah.
I tell dads this all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, look, your son's training. In 5 years, he's going to be 15. You're going to tell him, take the trash out. And he's going to say, or what, Dad? I was like, so you better get out the mat, dude.
That's right. He's going to take you down, bro. You better be ready.
Like, yeah, you better do those chores. You say, or what, Dad? What you going to do? Like
that's right. I've been paying for these lessons. You're going to kick my ass. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah, you better get training.
That's awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate we're an hour. We're already, we already got to the time. So, I really appreciate you coming in, man. This was great information. And I hope anybody that, gets all the way through this, the key takeaway from all of this is that, any realtor, whatever your position in life is that there are going to be, or there could be situations that come up to where your physical, presence is threatened, whatever that means. And it's never a bad thing to have knowledge on how to handle yourself should those situations ever arise, right? Be the warrior in the garden, not the gardener in the war. And, the more that you have knowledge of this type of stuff and the benefit that you get, whether it be through mental, toughness, through physical, you get your body into shape, but then also just be able to handle yourself when those situations come up. There's really not a downside to this. And I'm the biggest, what do you want to call it? Not proponent, but I do this stuff all the time, which is bad, which is I have ideas of things I want to do, but then you never actually do them. And so the hard part about all of this stuff is you just got to go try, right?
Yeah.
Just show up. Just show up. And it's easier said than done, but we all say, well, I don't have time. Well, everybody has time. We all have the same amount of time. It's just what you prioritize for your time.
Absolutely.
And you can put it towards that, or you can put it towards playing Call of Duty, but, or watching Desperate Housewives, but those aren't going to get you any real benefits in life. So I really appreciate you stopping by. Anything else you want to say before we roll off?
Nothing.
No?
Nothing.
Okay.
Stay hydrated.
Yes. Drink the gallon of water that Manny brought with him too. Well, thanks to everybody that stuck around. Really appreciate it. We'll be back next week, and y'all have a good weekend. Easter weekend, I guess, is coming up, right?
Yep. Happy
We'll
Easter.
see you guys.